Hey there, welcome to another episode of Deeply Rooted. This is episode 105, and we're really excited about our guest here this evening. Just to give you a little introduction, we've got Brad Kinder and his wife Kelley with us, and Brad is the founder and owner of Healing Water Counseling Center. They've got approximately 50 employees in locations in Cedar Bluff, Wytheville, Wise, and they're actually moving their Lebanon offices currently to Abingdon, and hopefully that should be there by late this summer. Brad's also the pastor of the Place of Grace Church in Richlands, Virginia. He's a licensed professional counselor, and he's a certified substance abuse counselor through the Virginia Board of Health Professionals. He's also a member of the American Association of Christian Counselors and the American Counseling Association. And his lovely wife, like I alluded to a moment ago, Kelley, she serves as the clinical supervisor for the intensive in-home service program with Healing Waters Counseling Center, and she's also a licensed professional counselor in both Virginia and South Carolina. And currently, right now, both of them are working on their doctorate to become licensed clinical psychologists. So I think what we can say is you guys have more degrees than a thermostat right now, man. Congratulations.
Well,
yeah.
That's just a fancy way of saying that you have a lot of student loans to pay back.
Hey, thank you guys for being on the podcast. I know technically right now we're recording. I know people will be listening to this later this evening. We appreciate you guys taking time out to be a part of this. But I kind of want to kick it off just to let everybody know a little bit about who you all are, if you want to, and you can go in any order you'd like to, but just give us a little bit about where you grew up, your testimony, how you came to faith, and sort of maybe we'll work our way into counseling in just a moment. So,
sounds good. Well, I'll let Miss Kelley go first.
Sounds good.
Great. I grew up in Jonesville, Virginia, which is a little town in Lee County, which is the very tip of the state, borders Tennessee and Kentucky. A lot of your listeners are probably familiar with the area.
Sure.
My family didn't really take me to church growing up. That sounds kind of weird to say, but when I was 11 years old, I was at Vacation Bible School at a little church near my house, a Free Will Baptist church, and I got saved during that Vacation Bible School. Kind of started going to church on my own. My parents had faith, but never were really big on attending church, so they would take me and drop me off, and I kind of did my own thing, going to church, go to Sunday school, stay for service. And then there was this couple that I refer to as my second parents, and they sort of took me under their wing, and they would take me home from church. And I guess young adulthood, I sort of strayed here and there with my faith, but thankfully, here now, almost 40 years old, I feel like the Lord has brought me a long way, thankfully, and I feel like I'm getting more and more grounded in His truth, growing in grace, and I'm just really thankful for His blessings and all the grace and mercy He has shown me throughout my life.
Amen. I want to make it on record. I did not ask Kelley her age, so don't let anybody tell you. She said almost 40, not exactly, so I'm not going out on that.
I always pick on her because she's 11 months older than me, so I always tell her that I respect my elders. So.
Well, Brad, how about you, buddy? Like, where did your story kind of start?
Well, I'm from Tazewell County, Virginia, and then when I was going into 6th grade, my dad's job got moved, and he was a coal miner for about 33 years. And so we moved to the big city of Honaker, Virginia, and graduated from Honaker High School in 2001 with the infamous Heath Miller of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and graduated with Heath and played ball with Heath growing up, football and baseball. And I pretty much was always in Pentecostal churches as a kid. I joke and tell people that I was in what's called utero church because I was in church when I was in my mom's uterus. So I went to church from the time I was conceived until now. I've just always been in church, and Mom was very faithful. My parents got married in 1969, and my mom faithfully took my brother and sister and I to church until 1990 when my dad got saved. So for 21 years, she was faithful to take herself and her kids to church. And then my dad became a Christian in 1990. And then continued in church, and they're still married and still go to church every Sunday they can, and they're one of those rare couples that are married 50 plus years, and so but we were always in Pentecostal churches, and then when I was in high school, I became very interested in a local church that was probably running 400 members, and it ended up being a Word of Faith church, and I did not know that at the time, and I just thought that was what you did. I thought if you had enough faith that you could, pretty much tell God to do whatever you wanted, and if you fasted hard enough and long enough and believed hard enough, that pretty much God was like your genie in a bottle, and then you just, if you would be His golden boy and just work real hard on not sinning, then you would have these blessings and favor, and if you have a need, sow a seed, that kind of thing. And so I was in that for a while, and then went to college in 2001 in undergraduate studies at a liberal arts Southern Baptist college, and so that's when around 17, 18 years old is when I really started coming out of the Pentecostal movement, and became more in Southern Baptist vibe there for a while, and then graduate school was also Southern Baptist, and so I was kind of enmeshed in that for a while, but I continue to have a lot of friends in the Pentecostal church and Baptist, all denominations.
Sure.
And I'm sure we may talk about that later in the podcast, my journey to Reformed theology, but pretty much just always been in church, and for that I'm thankful that my parents introduced me to the Lord at a young age, and that I was raised in a Christian home. Really, man, my childhood was fabulous. I think the only thing I would stress about it as a child is, am I going to be able to get the latest Nintendo game that comes out? I mean, my parents were like Beaver Cleaver. It was it was a very healthy home environment, and I'm really blessed to have the parents that I do. So,
tell me how you guys got into counseling.
Well, I don't think I'm cut out to do manual labor, and so
I started to say, you told me your dad is a coal miner, so going from coal mining to counseling, there's got to be a story there.
Well, yeah, the story is they call me Blister. I show up when the work's done. So I knew that I couldn't do manual labor for a living because I couldn't hack it. But in all seriousness, my dad would talk to me, and I'm the first person in my family to ever graduate from college.
Wow.
And so that was something that they encouraged, and I'm the youngest child, and I just I don't know. I've always enjoyed talking to people, and I was kind of the guy in youth group growing up that people would always come to and tell their problems to, or I'd go get a haircut and the barber's telling me all about his personal life story, and and I've just always enjoyed talking to people and trying to help people, and so I originally, it was kind of funny, when I was in college, my youth pastor, when I was in high school, he was a federal probation officer, and so I really looked up to him. And so when I first went to college, I majored in criminal justice and minored in psychology, and I wanted to go into the criminal justice field. And so I looked at things like the ATF or the FBI or even federal probation, and then I kind of changed my mind on that. My senior year of college, I had 15 credit hours to go to graduate, and my academic advisor, they called me Rev. That was my nickname. He said, Rev, you can either finish your senior year here and take 15 credits, in elective courses, or I can send you to the police academy and we'll give you a 15 credit hour internship. And I thought, wow, that's awesome. So I went to the police academy and did the whole 9 yards and got certified in handguns and got pepper sprayed, all that kind of stuff, and went through the same training that a county police officer or town police officer would go through. I think it was about a 15-week academy, and so then I knew I was wanting to be in the criminal justice field, so I graduated with my bachelor's, and then I kind of kicked the idea around of becoming an attorney, and so I took the LSATs and went to a law school for orientation, and was looking at that route, and then God had different plans, and I just I didn't proceed with that. Some things came up, and then I saw this ad in the newspaper. It's kind of funny. It said grief counselor, and I thought, hey, I can go to the field of counseling and can be a grief counselor, and so I applied for the position, and I got a call for an interview. Well, lo and behold, it had nothing to do with grief counseling. It ended up I was selling cemetery plots at a local cemetery. And so, I always joked around and said I worked the graveyard shift. I had a lot of people under me, And I did that just for, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks. And I was just out of college, just looking for a job. And then someone told me about a substance abuse case manager position that had come open at a local community services board, and so I applied, and that's kind of how I got into counseling, and worked in the community services board for a while, and then I left there and went into the Virginia Department of Corrections for somewhere about 5 years, and did that, and worked at different prisons and different security levels, and moved up through the ranks there, and was promoted within that 5-year period, and then in May of 2010, matter of fact, this month makes 12 years, our anniversary. I was feeling led to open a private practice, and I came up with the name Healing Waters Counseling Center, and that comes from John chapter 4. Verse 14, where Jesus is at the well with the Samaritan woman, and he says, drink of this water and you'll never thirst again. And so that's kind of what gave me the name Healing Waters. And I tell you, man, if I could show you a picture how I looked when I first opened, I looked like Dookie Howser. I was a young fella, and looking back on those pictures, I think to myself, people must have been pretty miserable to come see me for therapy because I look like a baby. But yeah, that's kind of how that happened. And so I was a solo practitioner at the time, and then we just started getting referrals, and I got really, really busy. And then I remember when I hired someone to help me as a receptionist, I remember thinking that, I'd made it big time because I had an employee, even though it was my mom and she worked for free. No, I'm kidding. But then we just started growing more and more and more, and started adding a staff member, here and there. And so here we are 12 years later, and we've got 4 offices and approximately 50 employees, and over 35,000 patients in our electronic health record. As a matter of fact, it's probably well over 40,000 at this point. I need to double check that, but we've treated that many people, opened up that many cases since I went into private practice, and so it's definitely, I look at it as a ministry and a calling, and I love serving others and helping others, and so yeah, that's kind of my story. So.
That's awesome. Kelley, did you have a similar background, or did you get into college and then decide later on that was something you wanted to do?
Yeah, I did decide around age 19 that I wanted to go into the field. What happened with me was I had started college and tossed around some different ideas. I was actually in a radiology tech program in November of 2000. What year is it? 2001. And suddenly at the end of November that year, my dad passed away. And so that kind of threw me for a loop with everything. And then 6 months later, in May of 2002, my grandfather passed away suddenly. So I'd experienced those two losses within 6 months. So for about a year there, I struggled pretty severely with some anxiety and depression myself. And I was one of those people that I just thought, I can handle this on my own. I'm strong enough. I can do it. If I can't fight this on my own, I don't have enough faith. And, all those cliches that I think a lot of people in the Appalachian region, especially rural Appalachia, tend to believe those types of things.
Yeah.
I fought through it. I made it through it. And about a year later, it was like a light bulb went off in my mind. I was like, if I had gotten help for that, I could have probably gotten better a whole lot quicker. And that is when I chose to direct my studies toward counseling. I got a bachelor's degree in psychology from UVA-Wise 2006. And then after that, I went on to work in the field as a bachelor's level clinician providing mental health services until 2000. See, I'm showing my age now. I'm forgetful. 2013, I went into a new job location. I was working in a high school providing mental health treatment to students in the school setting. And I was just around that learning atmosphere and had a good friend that I had developed a relationship with there. And she was in a master's program. And it kind of all that worked together just for the Lord to lead me back into school. And so I went back to Liberty University and did an online program and got my master's starting in 2014. And then I finished that in December of 16. I got licensed as a licensed professional counselor in 2018. And then Brad and I had met in 2016, and thankfully the Lord knows what he's doing, and he converged our paths, even though we both had developed that background separately. It just came together in a really nice way that the Lord was able to use our background and our education and our careers to be a blessing to others and to support each other. And then about 2 years ago, we decided to go back and work on our doctorates. So I guess we're kind of lifelong learners, and he plans to pursue more of a forensic psychology route, and I plan to focus on neuropsychology. So,
I tell people that I want to move up from a Mr. Pibb to a Dr. Pepper.
Nothing wrong with Dr. Pepper. I'd okay that, yeah.
That's great. Or Dr. Thunder, I don't know. Something other than a Mr. Pibb.
How do you guys get to minister in your occupation? Or is there a lot of leeway in this, or is this something that you kind of have to temper?
Well, there is some leeway. The main thing is when someone comes for counseling, this is something that's drilled into your brain whenever you're in graduate school, is number one, you never force your beliefs on a patient. And no matter the beliefs, whether you're a liberal therapist or whether you're a conservative therapist, it's not our therapy. The therapy is that's the patient's therapy, and we're just there to guide them and to provide feedback and support, and in a non-judgmental, empathetic way. And so that's kind of 101 is you don't force your beliefs on a patient. And but if a patient wants to incorporate faith-based interventions into their treatment, and if that's appropriate, then we'll do that upon patient request. But I do prefer to practice with a holistic approach. A lot of the empirical research shows if you have a biopsychosocial, spiritual kind of model, mind, body, spirit kind of approach, that's a more what would you say, robust or just a more comprehensive approach. And it's kind of the way I looked at that when I opened Healing Waters is, if someone goes to the doctor and they're having back pain, well, that's one element. They're having pain in their back. But what about the mental strain and the emotionality that comes from that because maybe they can't work anymore? And and maybe that man who's having severe back pain, his job was his identity, and now he can't go to work every day, and now he's depressed. And so there's an element that's being left out if the doctor just focuses on the pain. And then what about the spiritual aspect? Does that person think that God is punishing them because of their pain, or that they've got hidden sin in their life or something? And so there's all these factors that come into play. And so I do believe we're mind, body, spirit, and I don't think you can separate the three,
Yeah.
So,
Kelley, what do you think are the most common issues or conditions that you guys face or address on a regular basis?
We definitely see a lot of anxiety and depression. That tends to be something that so many people are suffering with. Marital problems. We work a lot with children with emotional and behavioral problems. Those symptoms in children seem to be increasing. So we do see a lot of that.
ADHD.
ADHD, educational issues, family dynamics, working with families, and grief and loss. It's really the whole gamut of things. Our practice it's an outpatient clinic. We provide some more intensive services. So as you mentioned earlier, that's kind of my forte is managing the intensive in-home services. But from the clinic-based perspective, we really see just kind of a lot of those standard things that you're likely to encounter on an everyday basis.
You guys mentioned that you also practiced in South Carolina some. Is there anything in Southwest Virginia that stands out more than in South Carolina, just simply regional based?
Yeah, we have seen that. We see a lot of poverty in Southwest Virginia, and a lot of substance abuse, a lot of self-injury, especially with teenagers. Cutting is very, very popular. So we see a lot of that, and that's all over the United States. But it seems like matter of fact, I just finished a 25-page paper in a multicultural class that I completed for my doctorate, and I did the project on the coal fields of rural Appalachia, and it's a very unique area, Appalachia, and we're actually considered a silent minority, which is a problem because some people don't perceive that we're a minority, but we are. We're a silent minority, and there's things that comes from from environmental toxins to just culture and some of the what we might call being wanting to be individual and not get help and just try to deal with things on our own, and it's kind of taboo to seek counseling or to seek help from a doctor, and you just don't talk about things, you just deal with it on your own or deal with it in your family, or you have the spiritual aspect as well, being here in the Bible Belt, where people think that you can just pray everything away. And if you've got a fever of 103, just throw a Bible scripture at it and have faith, and then you'll be healed. And as I'm pretty confident you and I both believe that God uses medicine and doctors and therapists to help manage and cure disease, and so that's a factor too. And I know when I first opened Healing Waters Counseling Center, I had some churches that kind of come against it, and they were viewing me as, I'm like, what do you think I am, a witch doctor? I'm a Christian therapist. And
we actually had someone ask when we opened one of our more recent offices if we use holy water in sessions.
Oh, wow.
It's just so funny, some of the stigma that comes. But I've really worked hard to normalize mental health treatment over the past 12 years. And what I want it to be normalized to where people, if you let's say, Jeremiah, that you've got a counseling appointment tomorrow, and your friend calls you tomorrow morning and says, "Hey, bro, you want to do lunch today?" And you say, "Oh man, I can't. I gotta see my therapist at 1. But what about dinner? Can you do that?" I want it to be normalized, just like, "Oh, I got to go see my chiropractor, or I got to go get my teeth cleaned." And so I've really worked on that to try to break that stigma in Southwest Virginia. But something in South Carolina, you don't really see that in South Carolina. It's more it's normalized. It's just like you're going to see your whatever, your chiropractor or your family physician, or and we're kind of grouped into that. But we fought that pretty heavy here in Southwest Virginia, just breaking that stigma. And I think it's a cultural thing. I told someone I'm going to write a book sometime that's called about Appalachia. I'm going to call it Pills, Poverty, and Pentecostals. And so that's kind of, to me, that summarizes the coal fields of rural Appalachia.
Let's talk a little bit about how things have changed. Obviously we've all went through this episode of COVID over the last few years, and obviously we didn't see that coming out of anywhere, and things have navigated in different directions certainly since then. But you mentioned being in this 12 years or so. What's the biggest changes that you all have seen as far as like what you're treating now, and maybe what people are bringing in and dealing with that you didn't necessarily see years ago?
That's a very good question. You want to take that one, Kelley?
We had actually talked about that a little bit earlier, and I think that our consensus is really it's with the youth. There seems to be such a cultural shift in the younger generations, kids that are going through adolescence. They're being influenced by social media, also being influenced by COVID, and so increases in anxiety and depression. But I think a lot of it is the social media and peer influences of the time that's increasing things like self-harm and suicidal thoughts, and gender identity issues and things like that in younger people that you didn't really see as much of that in the past.
Do you think it's an unattainable model? Like, it's this idea that I can't reach a certain level, or they're seeing something that seems to be reality but it isn't and they can't live up to it? Or is it something else you think's at play there?
I think the reality component, like you mentioned, has a huge influence on it, because they're engulfing themselves in social media and things on the internet, having access to so many different things. And I have seen children and adolescents that it's like they form their own alternate reality. They don't, almost like they can't tell the difference between what is real and what is make believe, or definitely that's been a part of it.
And those are things that, when we were kids, that just wasn't, Sure. I remember my first car was a 1988 Chevy Beretta, and I had a bag phone.
And I didn't get my first flip phone until college.
So, I was telling my daughter about, there was a time where I had to go to the store and would buy a card and load it on the bag phone in my car to load minutes, and she's looking at me like I'm 100 years old. She's 13 and thinks I'm ancient. So
I did have a proud moment today, because some of our younger staff members, it's interesting, we're seeing this new generation rise up. So we have these younger 20-somethings that are coming in to work for us, and now we feel like that older generation. We're kind of in the middle. We're not retirement age, but we're not just out of college either. So they were talking about favorite childhood shows growing up and how they watched something on VHS tapes. I said, that makes me so happy. I don't feel so old.
I love it.
That's funny.
Brad, give me a good defense of why biblical counseling is so important.
Well, I think, I know that the Bible refers to God as the wonderful counselor.
Yeah.
And you see many incidences in the Bible where people were counseled, disciples, discipling, and I think there are several scriptures that we could cover that kind of helps to support biblical counseling, and Kelley actually had looked some of these up earlier, but you look at 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. This is the English Standard Version, ESV. It says, we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and we take every thought captive to obey Christ. Some versions say something to the effect of we take every thought captive and make it obedient unto the Lord, or obedient unto Christ. And so what we do, most of the therapy that we provide, it's called cognitive behavioral therapy, and that teaches that your thinking causes your feelings and your feelings causes your behavior. And so if someone wanted faith-based interventions combined with their treatment, it's kind of interesting, this scripture that says you take every thought captive and make it obedient unto Christ. And that's a lot of what CBT teaches as well, is you have to look at your maladaptive thoughts that you may be having, irrational thought processes, and you have to kind of take those captive, so to speak, and kind of put it on trial. And we teach our patients that feelings are not facts. So just because you have a feeling about something doesn't mean it's a fact. So we have to look at that objectively and see if there's a more rational thought that we can replace with the negative thought that someone may be having. Then you look at Romans 12:2. It says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." So you look again there, the renewing of your mind.
Yeah.
I look at our mind as like a computer, and sometimes we have to just kind of restart. We have to reboot, and I think we have to renew our mind daily, because you or I, either one, Jeremiah, we could start thinking about all the things going on in our life, all the negative things that we may perceive that's happening around us, and in about 15 or 20 minutes, we're going to be pretty miserable, right?
Yep.
And so we have to stop thinking that way and to thought block that and to replace that with something healthy. Then that leads into Philippians 4:8. Apostle Paul said, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things." And so the Bible is very clear that we're not to be thinking on negative things because it's not healthy to do that, and it can lead to anxiety and depression. And so I do think that there is a need for biblical counseling, and the kicker is just making sure that the patient is open to that, and that would be appropriate, and because we never want to do something that would be inappropriate or unethical,
right,
or pushing our beliefs on someone. And with that being said, we're obviously trained secular therapists, and so many times we do therapy that is secular based, and the patient may not want any kind of spirituality, whether it's Christianity or another religion. They don't want that incorporated in their treatment at all, and that's okay too. Again, we don't push our beliefs on anyone, and I see patients all the time that maybe have different values than what I do, but that doesn't impact their treatment because it's not my counseling, it's their counseling. I've worked with men before that have been referred by the court system because they've engaged in domestic violence with their spouse, and they have beaten their spouse to where they're been in the hospital. And so that's against my values. I would never strike my wife because I love my wife,
right?
But I can objectively work with that person, even though we have maybe different values. I've worked in the Department of Corrections where I've literally worked with inmates that had no issue with murdering someone, or they had no issue with raping someone. As a matter of fact, they would laugh about it, and they had no remorse. And so their value set was different than mine. I don't ever plan on doing something like that, but I was able to work with them and not judge them, and be able to offer unconditional positive regard and a non-judgmental environment, because that's what our profession is about, So
a lot of grace. I mean, you about have to have it in order to be able to be in that. Yeah,
you do, and I really think with our denomination in particular, well, we're all about grace, and the name of my church is also called the Place of Grace.
Right.
And so we're a Gracie bunch, and because I know that there's no good that from a biblical standpoint, there's no good that lies within any of us.
Sure.
Not talking about man's standard, but God's standard is perfection. And so the Bible teaches that all of our righteousness is as filthy rags, and that there's no one that seeks for God. There's no one that does good, no, not one. And so we know the only righteousness within us as a Christian, as a believer, is the imputed righteousness of Christ. So you have to have grace, I think, because but for the grace of God, so go I. You know?
Yeah.
I think just to add to that, even though when it's not appropriate from a clinical perspective or secular perspective to engage the client in biblically based Christian counseling, we still rely on God for our strength because we're Christians, and I think that's always going to be there, and that's going to be the source of our fuel and our belief that drives us to continue doing what we're doing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, none of us are living a day without grace, and I don't care what profession you're in, and I think what you guys deal with on a regular basis is a prime example of that. I mean, you have to go in every day fully charged, fully committed, not like he said in your own righteousness, but understanding that there is a God full of grace and truth operating here that we've got to lean in on daily. So, yeah, that's really good. I want to ask you another question here as far as maybe looking ahead or really right now what's going on the landscape. You guys seeing anything on the horizon that you're starting to see more of on a regular basis? And I'm going to throw out a couple of options here, and again, shoot me down if I'm wrong on this, but transgenderism, pedophilia is a big topic nowadays in culture. You mentioned earlier suicide increases or suicidal thoughts. Anything out there on the horizon that you're seeing like, hey, might want to make our audience aware that some of this stuff is starting to gain some traction?
I think they call it non-suicidal self-injury. Is definitely prevalent, and in your middle schools, and I see this even with my own daughter. She's in 7th grade, and 7th grade is a tough year for kids. You've got the hormones, and just they're not a 6th grader, but they're not an 8th grader. They're kind of in between there, and it's they've got the puberty and all these things, and hormones, and so much confusion, and they we're seeing an uptick in depression and anxiety, and a lot of patients that we see are in that age range, and they're having thoughts of hurting themselves, or they actually have hurt themselves either by cutting or by taking more medication or something like that. But I definitely think that that's going to continue, and unfortunately, I do think it's going to remain and may even increase quite a bit. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, social withdrawal, problems with social interactions.
Okay.
I think that COVID could be to blame for that. I think the being so intertwined with video games and social media and electronics has a lot to do with that as well.
I'm going to give you one last question here and we'll wrap it up, but sort of looking ahead, if let's say you're talking to parents or individuals who are kind of on the fence about counseling and they've got some reservations about it, what would you say to those people that are kind of in that limbo and thinking, well, I'd like to get some help, but I just don't know where to start? Or maybe they've got children or a spouse or a family member that they're thinking, man, we can't get through to them, but they certainly need some help. And the grace thing to do is to get the help. Like, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, there's such a high percentage of people that have mental health problems that don't get treatment.
Yeah.
And I think some of that's just the cultural stigma here in the Appalachian Mountains, because you don't really see this in urban areas. It's just more rural areas, and it's even more magnified in the coalfield regions of the Appalachian Mountains. But I think that, first of all, you have to look at, why do people have reservations? Maybe they've had a bad experience before. But I always tell people I had a really bad experience at Food City one time, but I still go back and buy my groceries every week.
Right.
And so just because you had a bad experience with one therapist or one dentist or one whatever doesn't mean that the whole profession is bad. And so it may be that you just need to try someone else. Because I do think finding a therapist is different than just going and having your teeth cleaned. You can pretty much go to any dental practice and a hygienist can do about the same job. And yeah, they may have different personalities or whatever, but it's not like talking to a therapist, you know. And you really have to click with the therapist, and rapport has to be built and trust established and things for them to be able to benefit in a better way, in my opinion. So I think that's kind of step one, is just fighting through those fears. People generally have about 4 basic types of fear. We have a fear of loss, a fear of failure, a fear of rejection, and a fear of the unknown. And if someone has that fear of the unknown, then they're really hesitant about starting treatment. But I always tell people that 85% of the things you worried about last week didn't happen.
Yeah.
And so taking that first step is crucial. And we noticed that our practice statistics show that first-time appointments, they only show about 40% of the time. And then once they come for that first appointment, second-time appointments show somewhere between 70 and 80% of the time.
Wow.
And so the proof's in the pudding there. I think once they come and they realize that, we're not witch doctors, or we're not going to, we're not going to lay you down on the couch like Sigmund Freud in the movies, or it's just sitting there having a healthy conversation with someone, getting feedback, getting an objective perspective on things. So I think that really helps to normalize it. But then I really think the core issue, maybe to answer your question, is just maybe pride.
Yeah.
I think people have pride, and my kid, or I'm not going to go here, or I'm not going to do that. I can deal with this on my own. And we all know that. I think there was a famous writer that said something to the effect of pride comes before the fall.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we just need an objective third party to kind of bounce ideas off of. And then, especially with kids, there's also something that's called the white coat syndrome. And what that means is basically, I could tell my daughter something. Maybe I can say, hey, you don't need to eat this because this is unhealthy for you. And then she wouldn't care about what I think about it. But then if her doctor told her to not eat that because it could cause diabetes, then she's not going to do it because the professional in the white coat told me not to, or whatever. So sometimes I think a family member can go and see a therapist, and they can get some objective feedback and come up with their own conclusions about things. And it might be the exact same thing that their parents have been telling them for months, but just because they figured it out for themselves at a therapist office, then it means more to them than just old mom or old dad saying it,
And I think an important thing for people that have never been to counseling to keep in mind that it's not the therapist's job to give you advice or to direct your life. The therapist's job is to come alongside you, walk with you through finding your own answer to your life problems, whatever that is. So most people don't want to be told what to do. So that's not what counseling is. And if you have a therapist that is giving you advice and saying, do this or do that, you probably need to find a new therapist because that's really not our role.
Absolutely. So that's kind of a stereotype as well. I'm glad you said that, Kelley.
Hey, tell our audience a little bit about how they can get in contact with you guys, where you're located, and then how they might be able to find you out there on the interwebs somewhere.
There you go. When I was a solo practitioner, I used to kid around and tell them my slogan was, if you're sad, call Brad. Or if you're mad, call Brad if you need anger management. But now that we're a group practice.
If you're sad or you're mad and you want to be glad.
There you go. We share thankfully all 4 offices in Southwest Virginia, we share the same number. I opened the office in Cedar Bluff first, opened that in May of 2010, and then opened the Lebanon office in 2014, the Whitfield office in 2019, and then last summer we opened the office in Wise. But we're, like you said earlier, we're in the process of transferring our Lebanon office to Abington. We bought a very pretty house on Main Street in Abington. It's just a couple baseball throws from the Barter Theater. So we'll be opening up there later this summer. But it's the same number. It's 276-963-0111. And then you just listen to the prompt and press option 1 for Cedar Bluff and so forth. And then we have a Facebook page. Then our website is Healing Waters CC. It's like counseling center, healingwaterscc.com. So those are the best ways to reach us, either through our website or through Facebook or through giving us a phone call.
Good deal. Now, how about the Place of Grace where you pastor? Like, where can people get in touch with you guys there? Where you located? When's your times of service?
Yeah, man, we're really excited. It's a new church plant. We've just been there a little over a year, and I've got some big plans for the church. We actually bought it's 6,000 square feet worth of store frontage in downtown Richlands, and one side's going to be the sanctuary, and then the upstairs will be a youth center, Sunday school rooms, Bible study classrooms, and then another portion downstairs is actually an old restaurant.
Okay.
And so we're in the process of refurbishing that restaurant, and we want to open up a faith-based restaurant out of the church, and we want to call it Say Grace Cafe.
Yeah.
Kind of like when you're growing up and your grandma would say, "Say grace, boy," over that food before you eat. So we'll call it Say Grace Cafe, and it's actually modeled after a company called One World Everybody Eats. And the whole premise of the organization is they say that it's a hand up, not a handout. And there's these pay-as-you-go restaurants. There's one in Whitfield, there's one in Boone, North Carolina, and one in Johnson City, and they all do really well. And kind of how it's structured is anyone can come and eat of any class, and there's no set prices for the food. So if you came and ate, when you went to check out, the cashier would say, "Well, how much would you like to pay today?" And some people may pay $5, $10, or $20, or whatever. And then you can sponsor little tokens and buy meals for people that can't afford their food. And so the research shows approximately 10% of people cannot afford their food. And so they're able to eat for free based on people paying it forward and purchasing those tokens. Wow. But what I like about the program is in exchange for their free meal, the person is asked to work for 1 hour and volunteer their time to kind of pay off the meal. And so they can sweep the floors or, whatever, take out the garbage. And that's why they say it's a hand out, not a hand, or a hand up, not a hand out.
Okay.
And so we want to hopefully launch that as well. That's going to be hopefully part of our ministry. We're really excited about that. But our service times right now, we have church every Sunday morning at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then on Tuesday nights at 6:30 we do a dinner, and then at 7 o'clock we start Bible study, and so that's our service times right now. And we do 2 different groups on Tuesday nights. We have a gentleman in our church who I love dearly, and he's been clean and sober from alcohol for over 15 years.
Wow.
And so he leads a recovery group on Tuesday nights, and then I lead more of an in-depth Bible study. And matter of fact, we start a new series tomorrow night. We got a curriculum from R.C. Sproul. It's called Chosen by God, and so that's what we're doing tomorrow. I think that'll go for 7 weeks. So we're really excited about that. So usually my Bible study looks like we'll watch a video and do a discussion. We have a workbook, and then we have the actual book that goes along with the Bible study that we all read independently in our own spare time, and we just sit around and kind of talk about it and process it. So it's a good time of growing in grace, and so hopefully more and more people will come to the church, and we're excited about just spreading the love of God in Richlands. So.
I love it. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate that. Again, find these guys, find them online, call them up. If you're looking into counseling, if you're looking into other people that may need some help as well, definitely want to reach out to them. If you're looking for a good church and you're in Richlands, you just heard one. All right, you got no excuse now. You know exactly where it's at. Place of Grace. You need to find Brad. You need to find Kelley. Tell them I said hello, and they'll be glad to have you there on Sunday mornings with them at 10 o'clock. Hey, listen. Go on over, hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel and on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review. Share it with other people. Go on over to our website at deeplyrootedpodcast.com. You got all the blog posts, all the archived episodes, and our upcoming ministry schedules on there as well. And if you want to, and you're really into Deeply Rooted, go on over to our Facebook page. You can join us there. We got all kinds of things, discussions. We'll throw out all sorts of polling options that you can be a part of, as well as far as our daily reminders and encouragements we put up on there also. So again, until next time, we love you guys and hope y'all have a great week in Jesus.